Thank you very much, but I'm not a guru at all. I don't want to be a guru of anything. Managing wolves and bears is extremely complicated, and all of you that have been dealing with that, they know it very well. But especially difficult in Europe, where the human density is so high. And so I was quite appalled when I saw this map, which is a childish map, but was published on Science, one of the most prestigious scientific journal on earth. And that's the way it was an editorial article. And talking about the fact that large carnivores are back in Europe. And you have these little figures of wolves and bears and lynx, you know, like, so all our spatial ecology and conservation plan is just gone, you know. they don't know what a map is. And well, the article accompanying this map was also very childish. So what I want to say is that even science sometimes need to be put back on hard data. And in this very brief presentation, I just like to point some of the ways that science has been used and misused or just ignored in dealing with large carnivores throughout Europe. Now, when I say large carnivores, I mean basically 5 species. I'm going to talk of 4. The 5 are the 2 lynx, the Iberian lynx and the European lynx, the wolverine, wolves, and bears. Now, these are the most updated map of distribution of the bear. This would be the lynx. As you can see, Scandinavia and Finland always come out with a lot of animals, but what is this the pointer? This is the mouse. The mouse? Okay. Okay. Well, you can see the difficult part of large carnivore conservation is, of course, Central and Southern Europe, which is interesting. Wolves, quite a few wolves. If you want to know numbers, you know, there are about 3,000 wolves in Spain, about 1,000 in Italy, and, you know, 210 in Sweden, so we know that very well. I'll come back on that later on. And wolverine, which of course is a northern business, and we don't deal very much with that. Now, in general, these large carnivores are increasing throughout Europe. Most species, almost everywhere. There are some local stable or decreasing population, but generally increasing in numbers and in range. And the reason for this increase is basically the fact that most of Europe has been changing the way humans have been using the land. So most of the mountains and the marginal agriculture has been abandoned. People have moved from mountain areas down to the coastal areas, the lowland, and this has given new room for prey and for predators, of course. Somebody like to think that also human attitudes have been changing in the last years. I don't think that's true. It's just a wish. Let me go back. So we cannot actually say that the increase in large carnivore is a conservation success. It's rather an accident, or it's something that is the result of a natural sociological, ecological event. It's not the result of a planned conservation action. And this is something, is the most important take-home message. All the major conservation issues are not solved. Conflicts. I was talking with before with some of you, and I mean, all sorts of conflict. Domestic animals killed. Hunters complain that predators like to kill their hunter's prey, social conflicts, values attached to some of these animals. Maybe the lynx does not appeal to many people, but certainly the wolf is a species that is rarely indifferent. Social conflict perception, you know, animals are felt as evil or as a saint. Both extreme are just bad, but this is what we have to deal with when we talk about wolves, for example, or bears. Those are the famous bears eating garbage at a dump, just at the outskirts of the second largest city in Romania, Brașov. And the whole city is proud of these bears. And then 2 years ago, of course, a family was killed by a bear, which is normal. But then nevertheless, people think that that is something that they have to be proud of. And of course, all sorts of historical perception. There are cultural resistance. When the wolves came back to France, there was a revolution. These are the French people complaining. This would be in Spain, and so on. So rarely large carnivore conservation is an easy job for conservation. There are a lot of conflict, and there are a lot of solutions, multiple solutions. I like to say that every single species in every geographical area, in every locality, has a different solution. So I'm actually, most of my time is spent to convince people that what works here for me in Italy or in southern Italy does not work in northern Italy, even less in Israel or in Sweden. Nevertheless, we keep receiving delegation of countries like Finland and Sweden and Norway, sending people down to the Abruzzo, which is a central part of Italy, to show to find out how come that Italian can have 1,000 wolves. They have found this magic solution of coexistence, which is totally wrong. If something works in Italy, this certainly does not work for Italy or Sweden. So there are multiple conflicts, multiple solutions, and in theory, the need for for a lot of science. We need science in ecology, in the human dimension, social science, and so on. So what I'm going to show you, just a few examples. Well, I have many, but time is a constraint. So I'm just use some of them. For example, most of the large carnivore in Europe are transboundary. This is the Western Alps. So this is Italy, France, Switzerland, and you can see the wolf pack. They just across the boundary. This is Sweden and Norway. They would have, they share the same population of wolves. The logic, if we don't want to call it science, would say that you have to manage that unit as one single conservation or management unit. In spite of this evidence, there was no response. The French are very proud of managing their own wolf, their own way. They do not want to collaborate. The Swiss have their own way. The Swiss are absolutely convinced that there is a Swiss way to carnivore conservation, and they don't want to share. But even between Norway and Sweden, the situation is the same. Sweden has been trying a lot to get the Norwegian government on board. Norway refused. And Norway allowed the presence of 23 wolves, and that's it. Science can easily produce map like that. That's the distribution, the dispersal of juvenile bears in Scandinavia. And you can see, bears can go everywhere, of course. From a biological point of view, this is a trivial result. Biologists don't even notice that. Politicians are very nervous about this. So what I want to say with this information is that sometimes science is seen with much not respect, but with suspicion, because it provides data that is very uncomfortable to politicians. But look at this one. We are northern Italy. This would be Genoa up here. And it just happened that a wolf was hit by a car here, up. I don't know how to work this. Here, you see the star up there? Well, anyway, here. This is Parma. Parma is the Po Valley. It was hit by a car. It was a dispersing animal, so obviously was going, who knows where, in the plane. And we fitted with a radio collar and put it back in the mountains, and this wolf started to move west. This happened a few years after the first wolf reappeared on the French Alps. And the French had been claiming that those wolves had been reintroduced, brought by somebody artificially to France. And the politicians were strongly backing this information because if they could prove that, they had a good way of saying, well, we can remove that because there's been an artificial reintroduction. So there was a lot of political pressure also on the French scientists to subscribe to this interpretation, you know, that wolves had been artificially brought back. Then it just by chance we could show that this wolf with the radio collar made his way all along the Apennines, entered France, went down to Nice, didn't like Nice, came back to the Italian, and then was finally killed here near Cuneo. Now, this is solid evidence. In a scientific environment, this kind of information is taken as true. So, but the French politicians didn't like it and didn't take it for true. So the way for science to get into conservation was our result was taken as true by the French scientists because we share the same language and we share the same philosophy or the same scientific method, and then the French politician trust the French scientist. So, you know, this is just to show you that sometimes the relationship between science and conservation is politics, basically. So the relationship between science and conservation is quite complicated. This is another interesting example of one bear that moved from Italy across Austria into Germany. Italy has made a very interesting project of reintroducing bears in northern Italy. It's not easy to reintroduce a large carnivore like a bear. But the Italian authorities in the north have made a major mistake of not thinking scientifically, and that means not thinking that this population will grow. It's not much science, you know. But will grow, and this person will move around. So this individual went through Austria. In Austria was welcome. Everybody liked it. They gave him a name, Bruno. I don't know why. And then this bear moved into Germany. And all the newspaper had headlines. Bears are back in Germany after 200 years. Bruno is welcome, wonderful, fantastic. Then Bruno ate 6 chicken, and that was the end of Bruno. Was killed. Was immediately killed. Germany could not sustain the loss of 6 chicken. So, you know, I mean, this is, again, I mean, I like to tell the story in this way, but it's a tragedy. You know, it is just a basic plain scientific information that is not at all understood. Politicians have a problem with dispersal. Yeah, they like to think that animals stay there, you know. We were in the Golan Heights 2 days ago with Nala. I mean, have you seen how many kilometers that wolves travel? More than 1,000. How far you go with 1,000 kilometers from the Golan Heights? You could get everywhere, even here. You could have a wolf here tomorrow morning, and that would be scientifically trivial, but politically very relevant. Okay, just a few other examples. I mean, I have many. In Castilla y León, which is one of the provinces of Spain, scientists produced a number of wolves, and politicians didn't like, and they hired their own scientists and produced a different result. So this is to say what? That there is good science and bad science, unfortunately, and the politicians do not know how to make a difference, or they pick up what is best for them. So this is our problem for us scientists, to make sure that only good science, or at least to teach the people how to make a distinction between good and bad science. In Sweden is probably the best country in Europe where science and management and conservation go very well together. I cannot think of a better country in Europe where management is strongly scientifically based. And nevertheless, last year there was a big discussion because a group of geneticists wrote that 1,500 links, which is the number of links in Sweden, is not a viable population based on genetic formulas. Can you believe that? How do you answer to that? So beware of geneticists. That's the message. But no, it's a joke. I know. I apologize for all the geneticists that are here. But Slovenia is another good case. Slovenia had about 450 bears. They decided that there were too many, and they wanted to kill a sustainable quota. And for them, a sustainable quota was 200. Now, it's easy to show them that 200 is not sustainable. In fact, what they want to reduce the population. So again, that was a clash between the two different approaches of managing scientific information. Italy, this is a case I like to make because it's actually, to me, a very good example of how difficult it is to get the scientific message through the politician, or even through the manager of a national park. We are involved now in trying to save the last few bears that are left in the Abruzzo, central part of Italy, just east of Rome. Before we began our project, the general feeling, expert opinion was that, well, maybe there are 50 left. Somebody said as low as 30, somebody said 100, but the general feeling was 50. Now, can you do a conservation of such a small population just on expert opinion like that? It's quite unsafe. No? It could be substantially wrong. So we went into counting these bears, and by applying capture, recapture modeling, using genetic sampling through scat and hair collection and all that, we came up with an estimate of 43. And a confidence interval 95 was 35-67. So 50 was quite correct. But making the politician understand the difference between 50 like that and 43 with an error attached, it's actually very, very difficult. Not enough. We thought that the confidence interval was too large. So let's try to make it smaller. In conservation biology, we know that it's very important. When you are working a very low number, the better the data, yes, the higher the chance that you can you apply good conservation. So we went into another run for another year that cost much more, 75,000 euro. And we reduced the error around 43. Now, the best estimate is now 40, between 37 and 52. Now, politicians will not understand why spend that money to get this difference. Say, well, it's 40, 43. It doesn't make a difference. So it's our problem as a scientist to make them understand. So we have to speak in a language that they understand. Otherwise, they will never be able to either never be able to pay for that cost and use that information correctly. Okay, this is a beautiful map. This is the pedigree of all the wolves in Sweden, just to show when good science is nicely made. In Sweden, it's the opposite. They have sampled all wolves in the area. Now, this stops in 2003, but they have continued. And let me close. We have been using habitat models to show where a wind farm had to be stopped and relocated for bear conservation. We were able to produce a model. We were able to explain it to the politician in a language that they understood. And this is one of what I consider one of my success. We stopped the development of a large wind farm in an area that is not used by bear, but it's a potential corridor for bear. And this is absolutely a first for Italy. You know, usually politicians are convinced when the animal is there. So, I mean, I don't do something because the animal is there, they will be directly affected. But to stop a development in an area that potentially is important for the animal is even more difficult. Okay, I don't want to talk about food supply, I don't have time, but this is just to mention that science is necessary also in the sociology area, and we introduce a scientific approach to analyzing people's attitude, you know, so that we could show, for example, that 95 of the people in Abruzzo like and loves bears, for example, and 85 like and loves wolves. So there is no need to increase awareness, work, and spending money on that. I don't want to talk about the conflict and predation because that's a lot of the stuff, and I don't want to mention that. But the last thing I want to mention, which is very important to me, is that with the Large Carnivore Initiative, which is an IUCN specialist group within the Species Survival Commission, we have brought together all the best experts of Europe, trying to change the way the European Union approached the management of large carnivores. So far, the Habitat Directive, which is the most important piece of legislation in Europe, forced the country to maintain what is called a viable population. The European Union doesn't call it a viable, they call it in a very nice way, which is that the population has to be in a favorable conservation status. What does it mean? And then there is and then in the end, after many, many notes, you will find the word viable without explanation. And we as a scientists know very well that viable can be interpreted in many, many different ways. But anyway, so we enter into this arena with the goal of convincing the European Union to abandon, at least for large carnivore, to abandon the idea that each country has to manage its own small population, but to manage it at population level, biological population level. So we finally got it through the European Commission, and the Large Carnivore Initiative got a contract from the European Union to have a workshop, to organize workshop in each European country between our group of scientists and the key government officer managing large carnivores. So we were really happy to be able to bring our science to the key decision maker on large carnivores. And we produced this piece of we call it science, yes, which is guidelines for population level management plans for large carnivores. There is a lot of explanation in the first part of this document about what is viability, why the ecological aspects are more important than the genetic one, but the genetic aspect also must be taken into account, and so on. You know, we don't produce the magic number, what is a viable population, but nevertheless, we provide these guidelines, and then we presented them to each government, and then we organize an European conference on this, and this is now formally approved by the European Union. So every European country that has to deal with large carnivore is bound to these guidelines, and and these are the major population that we identified for them. This is brown bears, this for wolves, and of course there is it's a scientific interpretation of a management issue, let's say so. So this is our mission for the large carnivore, which is to maintain and restore in coexistence with people viable population of large carnivores as an integral part of ecosystem and landscape across Europe. To reach this mission, there is a lot of science, but there is also a lot of politics. And so the battle continues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Luigi. We have time for one question. Okay, so think of questions for the question panel.
Okay. Who is next?
Yeah, the next speaker.